Hi, my name is Bronwyn Clarke. I'm running for Parks Tacoma Position 3, which is a board commissioner role. And it's a key role in Tacoma's parks because there are 5 board members who govern Parks Tacoma. And I'm running for one of those seats to level up how our parks are designed for not just play, but also as critical community infrastructure. So, specifically, I feel like they are an underutilized opportunity to co-locate resources to meet our neighbors where they're at when they're facing hard times. And also looking at our parks and green spaces and seeing how they can be leveled up to boost our climate resilience. And really, I started thinking about running after last year's presidential election, thinking about the tough times that our community is going to face and is facing currently. We're seeing the cuts to Medicaid, we're seeing loss of food stamps, SNAP benefits. And yeah, I'm just trying to find a way to support our community at a very local level through Tacoma's parks.
And I know you bring some important experience with you as well, if you'd like to expand on some of your qualifications of why you're fit for this role.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So, yeah, I've worked and studied government for over 10 years at this point. My focus has been on how do we better design services by directly involving people who are most impacted by those services and bridging the gaps between decision makers and those communities that have often been left out of those decisions over time. So, that has been the focus of my work, and I've done that in a variety of different contexts. So, social services. I've worked a lot on guaranteed income. I've done some work on domestic violence services, gun violence prevention, child welfare prevention, a little bit of work on minimum wage, those sorts of things. And in my current role, I work directly with cities, helping them to communicate and deeply engage their residents in making decisions about big problem areas that they are trying to tackle. So I've also worked at every level of government at this point, state, federal, international. I've done some work with Bogota and Mexico City and seen how they are innovating for their residents there. I think really my key skills that I bring to this work is like deep listening and co-design, meaning like involving people who maybe haven't been involved in making some of these decisions before, bringing them to the table, and then using that power to actually shift systems.
Yeah, that's so important. I'm so excited for that background that you're bringing to the table. I'd love to ask about some of your top priorities, if elected, that you'd like to focus on.
My big 3 campaign priorities has been around activating our parks for connection, community care, and climate resilience. So for connection, that means thinking through where we have underutilized spaces and seeing how we can support the social connection that is such a big protective factor when our communities do face hard times. So to me, that looks like exploring things like how can we better co-locate food trucks in our local neighborhood parks? How can we design little parklets in every neighborhood using parking strips or ways that we can kind of make a small little green gathering space for neighbors to meet one another and build that social connection that is really what I think of as a critical, literal social safety net. And then community care, I think one thing I would love to pursue is seeing if we can co-locate social workers at our community centers like the library has. So the library has a social worker who holds office hours regularly at the libraries. They currently don't do that at the community centers. So I think that that would be valuable to support kids and families before they hit crisis. Like, how can we prevent and get them connected to resources? Tacoma also recently passed a camping ban against unhoused communities using parks and camping. Something that I want to work on there is they are also trying to cut funding for the HOPE team, which is a behavioral health, mental health team that goes out and does this outreach in a very trauma-informed way. And I think that it is really important to see if Parks Tacoma can step up to resource that team specifically so that we are providing compassionate responses. And then lastly, on climate resilience, we need to plant a lot more trees. So figuring out how Parks Tacoma can actually set an ambitious goal for tree planting, and coordinate a lot more with the city and with local nonprofits like the Tacoma Tree Foundation in getting that done. So there's many, many more things, but those are just the highlights of things I want to work on.
Yeah, I think sometimes folks don't realize how interconnected everything really is. And so
Yeah.
people might think, oh, parks, what are you going to do with parks? But really, there's so many things that you can do
Yeah.
with parks. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a big reason too why I ran is like, how can we highlight these interconnections? And, no one government agency can do it all by themselves, but together, if you stop operating out of your silos and you work together,
Yeah.
because community doesn't experience these services in silos, right? So
Hmm.
if there's a reason why the library has a social worker, but the community centers don't, like, that's something we need to work behind the scenes to make happen.
Oh, absolutely. What's one issue that our community is facing that you're really passionate about addressing?
We are facing multiple crises at the same time. So it's really
Yeah.
to kind of cut through. I will say, though, my work has focused on prevention. So thinking upstream, really looking at like what is the issue that we're experiencing right now, and then what are the root causes of it. So in Tacoma, there's frequent concerns around public safety, around crime. I think root causes of that are inequality and poverty and people just not having opportunity and also a sense of belonging and people who really care and look out for them. So when the conversation, the narrative is around like these kind of symptoms of problems, but not looking at the underlying structural problems that are beyond an individual, but are our collective responsibility to address. That's where I think that we need to really invest in a preventative lens, which is like, how can we get resources to people before they hit rock bottom? By the way, doing that is a lot cheaper than when they hit rock
Yeah.
bottom. So
Absolutely.
from just a fiscal responsibility perspective, like it's hard to plan in long terms with finances, but the more that you work upstream on supportive resources and social connection that allows people to meet each other's needs, the better it is.
Totally agree with that approach, and I love that. We talked a lot about community, and you mentioned connection. How do you plan to stay connected with community, especially when elected?
So, this is something that I've prioritized deeply in my campaign. In Tacoma, we're kind of split by freeways, and obviously there's a history of redlining that is also implicated with that. I live just a little bit south of the freeway, and I spend a lot of times in our South End, East Side, and South Tacoma neighborhoods. And those are areas that historically have not had representation on the Parks Board. And so I've made knocking doors there a big priority of my campaign. We've knocked over 6,000 at this point, again, concentrating in those areas that haven't been heard from. So that is something that I will try to continue to do. Obviously, I can't keep knocking doors when I'm elected because I'll be trying to do the work. But what I really want to do is think about beyond open houses, like how can I push Parks Tacoma and the board to engage more directly with residents of those areas so that we're getting the kind of more frequent touch points that pushes us towards resourcing those areas better with parks and green spaces. Because right now we have this problem where it's like the majority of parks are north. And so all the community engagement stuff happens north,
Yep.
and then those are the concerns that happen north. And so it's just kind of like a self-reproducing cycle. And there are some good efforts already with co-create to recreate sessions, but not everybody has a community center near them. And so it's important to do more outreach in areas that haven't been getting it.
And I love supporting local candidates as well because I feel like you all are so good at connecting to community. And a
Yeah.
lot of times we just see this disconnect as we kind of get, further up the chain and they're,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not the same. So thank you.
My background, I do a lot of user experience research and qualitative research. And so like that is core and central is like I want to be listening to community as much as possible. So that is something that I will continue through.
What do you feel sets you apart most from other candidates?
Part of it is that experience working directly with government, and then the more specific experience of doing qualitative research with community. And so I'm not necessarily listening to the loudest voices or the people who are the most frequent, appearances at various events. I know how to get beyond that to actually hear from folks who are more disenfranchised or just simply don't have the time to show up. So I have that deep listening skill set, and that's something that I know how to do at scale with a whole community. I also have a lot of direct experience working with government. And so while I've been talking about a lot of big ideas in my campaign, which has been intentional, trying to like get people's imagination going about what we should expect from our local parks, I also think I have a good amount of experience on knowing how to navigate the bureaucracy behind the scenes to actually get those things done. Because it's a big thing to say this, and then meanwhile, you've got staff being like, yeah, that's not going to work. Or, just knowing that, okay, there's this bureaucratic barrier between this organization, and like, why are they not working together? And that is work that I do professionally right now with cities around the world. So, in short, I think I have both vision that meets this moment, but also have a lot of sense of urgency because our community needs a lot more. And so we've got to work hard to get that done.
I love that. And I do want to ask how people can get involved. I know we're getting really close, but if they
Yeah.
still want to get involved and help support your campaign, where can they find you and how can they do that?
Yeah, so my Instagram handle is Clarke for Parks, Clark spelled with an E. I am also on TikTok, just Bronwyn Clarke, the one place where I have the two combined personally and with my campaign. So yeah, I've been trying to have a lot of videos recently educating folks about the role of parks and really starting those community conversations. So yeah, I will probably be active there. TBD election results, we'll see. But yeah, trying to keep some presence there.
I'm sure we'll still hear from you no matter how everything goes. So far, the conversations I've had, all of you are so involved in community already.
For sure. I
The
will
work
keep
stops
showing
here.
up in person.
But of course, we're going for the win here. I also want to ask one thing you wish more people knew about local government.
All of my day-to-day work is with city government staff elsewhere, and they are constantly expected to do everything all the time by community. And meanwhile, their hands are tied behind their back most of the time. So I have a whole lot of deep empathy for our local city government staff and any other local government staff who are really trying to do the most with very limited resources. And so I think the thing that I know from my work is like, yes, we have to expect a lot of our local government, absolutely. And yes, we have to hold them to higher standards. And they can't do it all. And so that's where there's a big role for community to play in meeting the gaps and seeing the ways in which government can do one thing and maybe can resource community to do things that they just literally can't do, whether because of past harm to relationships or trust. It's really important to kind of balance both. And I kind of have a perspective of we need everybody at the table doing the work.
Yeah, that actually leads me to one question that I'd love to ask you specifically. With that said, what do you feel are the most effective ways then for community to advocate for their needs and change, given the current system?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. It's hard to answer this question because there are certain ways of showing up that are privileged and are the default that government uses. So, in this context of Tacoma, that is public comment, sending in written testimony, tracking council agendas, and writing in. I feel like those are extremely limited forms of engagement that our local government prioritizes. So, something that I am working on is like, how can we support local government staff to get outside of the public comments settings for testimonies and feedback? Something that I do in my work is we coach city teams to have ideation sessions where community can come up with ideas and you can have a dialogue very informally about what folks would like to see in their areas. So I would say keep an eye out for any type of those opportunities, but unfortunately, right now it still privileges people who have the time to write an email, to send a message, or to show up in person. So
Thank you for that.
mhm.
Anything else you'd like to add before we go?
No, I just really appreciate you, Sam, and your work. And yeah, if all influencers were like you doing this work of highlighting local government, we might cure our democracy. Who knows?
Of course, it is my pleasure. I mean, this really does impact all of us, whether we want to admit that or not. So I'm
100%.
doing what I can, and I appreciate you also putting yourself out there and, running. So that's a huge thing to take on, and I appreciate that as well.
Thank you so much, Sam.